Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly deep dive into the world of college admissions.
My name is Julia. I was an admission officer at Haverford College, an outside reader for Emory University, and I currently work as a school-based counselor at a school in Massachusetts.
I'm Lisa, and I'm a clinical psychologist and college counselor. I have a daughter in college, a daughter in high school, and a son in middle school. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of two daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy is a wellness coach at the Keenan Flagler Business School at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. And I'm so blessed to be able to work alongside both my beautiful daughters at School Match for You, a college counseling firm that I founded in 2010. This week in the news, Julie and I discuss SlideRoom. We answer questions such as, what is SlideRoom and when do you use it? And are there different rules for different schools? Very, very important, especially for students submitting portfolios and other artistic expressions, including music. Also, our Roundtable's back, and we're talking about the future plans section of the Common App. A listener sends in a question, and she wants to know, why is the Common App asking for my daughter's plans after she graduates? So the Roundtable will tackle that. And we'll have the final segment of David Graves, Director of Admissions at UGA and 27-year veteran, part 5 of 5. Friends, just want to thank over 200 of you who signed up for Carlin Green's presentation on external scholarships and outside scholarships. We're getting there. You know, we took out a subscription to Zoom webinar and it holds up to 500. So it's my goal for us to get to the point where we surpass that. But each one seems like we're getting a bigger attendance. We thank you for all who participated. This time I did make sure that we recorded it. We've had quite a few requests for the recording, and so that will be available. I think the easiest way probably is to send an email in at this point. You know, we have the recordings up for 3 of them, but it's the audio only, and this was a 30-minute presentation and 30 minutes of Q&A. So you're really going to want to see the visuals on this one. So just shoot an email to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com if you want to see that presentation, and we'll get that out to you, within 7 days. All right, so I'm coming back to an admissions tip, to an admissions vernacular, and a big number. And I have to tell you one reason why I'm doing it is because I feel guilty that it's a Thursday and this episode may still be under an hour. And, you don't come to Your College Bound Kid for an appetizer, right? There's other podcasts for that, including our Monday version. That's like the appetizer. This is supposed to be the 4-course meal. But it's a 3-parter because, of course, our interview and our spotlight is the same thing. And then the segment with Julia is a little on the shorter side. The roundtable discussion is a little bit on the shorter side. So I'm like, all right, how can I spice up this appetizer and make it a little bit more fulsome? So I said, I'll give you an admissions tip, admissions vernacular, and a big number. So I've been wanting to give this admissions tip for a long time because it's, in some ways, it's so obvious, but it's never more needed. And it has to do with the writing portion of your applications. Really, I'm going to say the Common App, but it's really all writing portions of all applications. It's honors colleges, it's scholarships, and it's every other app besides just the Common App. And this is the tip. Read the damn prompt. Read the damn prompt. I cannot tell you how many mistakes I see in writing because people don't read the damn prompt. I see it all the time. In fact, this is how bad it is. I was working with a student. Let's see, I'm recording this on Wednesday. So I was working with a student on Monday. And the student's doing an amazing job on all of the writing pieces. And I turned to her and I said, you really read these prompts well. And then I thought to myself, why is it that that's so unusual? Wouldn't that sort of be obvious? But it's actually not. You may remember, regular listeners, I say, read the prompt 5 times. All right, I want to go a little further. use whatever you use, like a highlighter or different color ink, and mark the key words. Like let's say let's say you have a prompt and it wants to know about an experience that shaped you. Well, the word shaped you is very, very important. So you want to like underscore that, highlight that, accentuate that. But so much of my feedback that I'm giving students is you didn't actually answer the prompt. So while it may seem so simplistic, it's so neglected. And I can guarantee you any admission officer that's listening here is nodding in agreement. Yeah, people don't read the prompts. Another real common mistake is why our college and why your major at our college. And people answer one of the two. They answer why the major, but they don't answer why the school. They answer why the school. They don't answer why the major. Like, it's just, I mean, essays are replete with errors because people didn't read the prompt. And it kind of grinds your gears in admissions because you're like, is it really that hard? Like, they're third and fifth graders that can read this prompt. It's not like it's hieroglyphics or something. So read the prompt, accentuate the key words so you can't miss them, so you know what the focus is, and you'll be ahead of the majority of people just by taking that one simple step. All right, our mission's vernacular, so it's a little cheesy one, but when I was visiting Chapman University, in Chapman University, undergraduate population 6,000-7,000, graduate population pushes it like 10 to 11 in that range. So I personally think of that that qualifies for me as a medium-range school, medium-sized school, But what they said in their presentation is, we're not a small school, but we're also not a medium school. We're a smedium school. And that's my admissions vernacular. A little cheesy, but smedium, the word of the day, how Chapman describes their school size. All right, our big number. The big number is 57. And it has to, or I could have gone with 66, and I'll explain that in a second. So this is a hot off the press survey that's done by Inside Higher Ed Student Voice Flash Survey. They did it in partnership with Generation Lab. So they surveyed 1,012 students on campuses across the United States to find out how they plan on voting in this year's election. And the results are 57% for Harris and Walz, and 19% for Trump Vance. And then I know some of you are thinking, that's only 76. This isn't making sense. Well, that other 24 was either undecided or third party. So the interesting thing is, divide 57 by 19, you get 3, or times 19 by 3, you get 57. In other words, exactly 3 times as many college students plan on voting for the Harris-Walz ticket over the Trump-Vance ticket. And the reason why I said I could go to 66 is they also did the same survey in the battleground states, the 7 battleground states, the 4 Sun Belt states of Georgia, North Carolina, Arizona, Nevada, the 3 Rust Belt states. And I know some people don't like those terms, but that's just the labels that have been put on them. Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, those 7 states, the number was actually 66%. So, when I'm on college campuses, I do like to get the political culture. I like to ask questions about that. One of my favorite questions is, if there was a mock election about all the students, how do you think the students would vote? And it just gives it's another lens to understand the culture of the school. And so when I hear, if I'm ever on a campus and someone tells me it's more than 50% Republican, I know that that's actually quite an outlier. Because if you have 3-to-1 students that are Democratic and more than that in the battlegrounds, then when you get a school that says like 55, Trump, 45 Harris, or 60-40, that's actually quite an outlier. So some of the states that people have told me, some of the schools recently, people have said more than 50% Republican have been Clemson, but it was like close to 50. Furman, same thing in the 50s. Belmont, and High Point. So those 4 examples of schools that, it may seem like, 55, 45, whatever, that seems fairly even, but it's actually quite an outlier in the context of students, because students just do lean more progressive, and so do faculty as well. So anyway, just interesting tidbit. I thought you'd be interested, and it's our big number for the day, 57. If we go nationwide, 57-19, 3-1, or 66 in the battleground states. All right, friends. Last week, you heard Julia and I just have a robust conversation, and we're doing it again this week. And we're just talking about some things we're frequently being asked in the counseling room. And so we're going to talk about SlideRoom today, but Julia and I will have 2 more weeks where we're taking commonly asked questions. I hope you enjoy our conversation about SlideRoom.
And now it's time for Hot Topics in the News.
Hey, Julia.
Hi, Mark.
We're back to talk SlideRoom.
Yeah.
I've been getting a lot of SlideRoom questions lately. And I actually had it as a recommended resource a few weeks ago, but I just did like less than a minute blurb. What would you like our listeners to know about SlideRoom?
This is a great question because even I get a little caught off guard each year with SlideRoom. So I think there's like 3 myths about SlideRoom, or assumptions, I should say, that really get us at the 11th hour. So, and by that, I should start with, please start working on your portfolios well before the deadline. I know you all are so busy, and sometimes the portfolio is kind of like, oh, well, that's not, the main part of my application, so I'm going to save that to last. And then
hey, Julia, why don't you start with the basics? Because there's probably someone who's never even heard it, and I'd be thinking, I thought we were talking about SlideRoom. Why are we talking about portfolios?
Oh, yes. So SlideRoom is perhaps the most popularly used vendor among colleges for which a student to submit a visual or performing arts portfolio. However, I have seen SlideRoom be used for like engineering portfolios, or just a place where a student can kind of show images of the projects they work on. But almost always, if you're applying to college that allows you to submit an arts or visual arts, performing arts portfolio, they will require you to upload images or videos through SlideRoom. And here's where it gets a little tricky. There's an individual SlideRoom at each college that uses SlideRoom. So sometimes students think like, oh, like the Common App, I'm just going to use SlideRoom to disseminate my portfolio, but it's actually for each college. So, and sometimes you access it in a different way. Sometimes you start through the college's portal to get into their SlideRoom. Sometimes you just, you get a website that says, SlideRoom at columbia.edu, or, things like that. And then there is a cost with SlideRoom. I think it's about $5 generally for each school. And sadly, if you are a student who maybe got application fee waivers, they don't apply to SlideRoom. So I always say, please talk to your guidance counselor or call the college and just say like, hey, I get fee waivers, or like any chance I can get this payment waived, because $5 is nothing to a college. So just also, but if you are going to pay that, just a warning that you could end up shelling out, $50 for that. The other thing about SlideRoom is it doesn't look the same at every single college. So I'm going to actually, one college that caught me by surprise that used SlideRoom very much the same as most colleges. And most colleges will stipulate like, hey, we'll take up to 15 images, this much data. And then so you upload your images, but you're also required to put in some writing about what the image is. So if it's maybe you're a painter, you describe what the medium was, but also sort of what the painting is and how it is. But maybe you're a ceramicist, and so you would actually talk about sort of what you use to create that, and the picture is just trying to show what it would be if it was in real life. But Amherst took me by surprise a few years ago, and this is on me and the student for not checking, but their SlideRoom requires a letter of recommendation from an art teacher to accompany your portfolio. And there's nothing worse than asking a very busy teacher sometime around October 20th for a letter of recommendation that's due in a week. So I do think it's
and you're probably not the only one doing it.
No, you're definitely not, because I would say this happens. I've just gotten better about reminding my students from the get. I say, are you thinking about a portfolio? And then actually in their junior year, whether we're going to need it or not, we solidify that art teacher letter of rec.
And think about that, Julia. That's you with a caseload of 40, not someone else with a caseload of like whatever, 300, or something, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. And so I would say the worst case scenario is that you pay $5 for a SlideRoom and end up not submitting a portfolio. So it's just really in your best interest to either open one for if you think you're going to apply to that school with a portfolio, or get a hold of their admissions department. Some schools are really great on their website. They're really clear about how they use SlideRoom. You can literally just Google, Vassar College arts portfolio and things will come up. But not everyone has that information readily available. So if you're just, you haven't opened a SlideRoom, I really would. And then, while SlideRoom is the most popular, not every college uses SlideRoom either. So you do have to be a little flexible and ready. If you go to a high school where your art department is helpful, I would really use them, because often those teachers know how to photograph your art best. They know how to describe it best. And then if you live anywhere near a major city, actually most major art schools in the US, they travel around to do a national portfolio day in most major cities. So it's free. You can bring down your portfolio, whatever it may be within arts, and somebody who is a professor and maybe does this as a job for admissions and evaluates portfolios for admissions will actually critique you. And so I would also recommend that option, but I'm getting into the weeds here. So
no, this is good. And we've had a couple listeners, including one this week, reach out and say that, can you please do a deep dive on the visual arts? We had somebody lined up a while ago. It kind of fell through the cracks. So Vince and I were talking earlier today about some of the people that could be really good for that type of interview. And so we know we have one recently, Sarah Lovely, who is super knowledgeable on all things arts, but a lot of focus on theater there and dance and music, and touched on the visual, which is very different. And so know that we know that you guys want that, and we're working on lining that up, for you. Sometimes people, when they hear about SlideRoom, they're like, well, I thought it was the Common App, and they don't realize that schools have like an interface, or I'm not a techie, as like API or whatever they call those things. They've got a syncing system between the Common App and SlideRoom that all syncs into the CRM and the reader slate that they're usually reading on. Anything you want to say on that, Julia?
Yes, and that to me was one of the big myths, is that it sort of feels like, and that's very fair, that would sort of be my interpretation too, but that it's just not one platform, and that it's different at every single college.
Yeah. So the biggest thing is read the fine print. Read the fine print. And I'm sorry, but if you're a college, you need to make this stuff clear, because this is complicated enough as it is. And if they can't go to your website and get clear, explicit directions, what are you doing? Like,
I know.
Like, I mean, come on. Like, you spend all this money on all your, student search and buying lists of names and hotel airfare, rent-a-car meals, traveling all around. You can't invest all this money and then have a shoddy website on this. Some things sometimes I just shake my head. One is terrible admission officers. Same thing, right? Like, they're just doing such a disservice to the school. And then bad websites, and especially in technical areas like this, because this is technical. I'd say this is one of the more technical things that I encounter in admissions.
Oh, absolutely. Last year, my 8th year in doing this job, and I was working with a student who I know super well. It took us 2 class periods for me to get a hold of her 5 colleges to really understand, because their website was not at all clear about who could submit a portfolio. How do you do that? What are the expectations? how is it processed? Some only provide like a portfolio submission once your portal is open, and then you only have a finite amount of days of which to upload it there. And then some are really loosey-goosey, which is fine, but then please give students an example of how to submit a portfolio then. So totally agree with you, Mark. Like, it just really, people are already nervous. The arts are already inaccessible to low-income folks. Don't make it worse.
This is a different question, Julia, but are you noticing how many art schools are struggling? Like, a lot of art schools are really struggling. I think, like, I remember the time the women's colleges, it's been tough for a lot of them as well. It's, obviously you've got your Welsleys and your Smiths and your Spellmans and your Barnards, like, that are doing really well. But so many others are not. And so many of these art schools are struggling, and so they're merging with other schools or being taken over or closing. Boy, I think if you're looking at one of these schools, you really need to vet their financials. And I know that's not, what this question was about. And you may be using SlideRoom and you're not going to an art school either.
Right.
So I don't want to imply that this is just for art schools, but it's just something that's been on my mind a lot. And I mean, we've had a question come in that we just answered that last week in episode 471 in our last roundtable that looks at this coming up here. So anyway, thank you, Julia, as always.
Thank you, Mark.
All right, friends. Hopefully you're enjoying these Q&A sessions I'm doing with Julia. We'll be back next week. And next week, the conversation will be, do colleges really see senior year grades? Or do they not see senior year grades? That's going to be a good one. Hope you'll join us for that conversation.
And now it's time for a question from one of our listeners.
All right, friends, our roundtable's back. And if you're a regular listener, they were here for episode 469 and 471. And so, this week, we've got a question from a listener that we'll be discussing. And then we have one more week of our roundtable. And then probably won't be back for a while because our schedule is just too busy to pull all of us together. But we hope everyone enjoys this conversation about the future plans questions on the Common App. Like, why are they asking that stuff? All up in my business. Well, we have a fantastic question. All of us love it a lot. And I'm going to play it and let our panel chime in.
Hey there, YCBK team. Thank you so much for this podcast. My question is about the future plans in the education section of the Common Application. Students are asked to indicate the highest degree they intend to earn. Do they want to pursue a master's degree or a PhD, for example? Or do they just want to say other or undecided? Then they pick a career option from a kind of limited drop-down menu. They can also say undecided or other and type in their own career idea here. My question is, how do colleges really use this section? Should a student with some definite academic interests, but obviously no idea how things will turn out once they get to college, just be honest and say undecided for the career option? Or should they say something anyway? Say that they might like to get a graduate degree and maybe pick the other category if the drop-down career options don't fit. My senior won't be picking something nice and tidy, like an MD or a JD degree, that obviously match to doctor or lawyer. If he did graduate work, pushing real employment out a ways, he might ultimately even work in a field that doesn't exist yet or is still sort of emerging. Thank you for your valuable insight on what to do with the future plans section.
Vince, you want to kick us off with your thoughts?
Sure. That's a great question. I it's so fraught because sometimes you have students applying under different majors and they forget to return to that section. So I do think if there's a very clear interest and it matches in your activities and maybe you're in the supplement when you address the question about why a campus and you talk a lot about something, I think it would be surprising if there was that piece was missing. I think it's okay. It's definitely okay to just say, BA and then, graduate school, you can let that go. But I do think if you have a specific interest and it's in the drop down, or you don't exactly see, or you want to make really clear, I want to be a diplomat, that doesn't appear in the drop down. I do have students who do other, but I always make sure that when we're looking at the whole application again, recheck that section and just remember try to recall what we're applying under to make sure that everything matches in that area. But I do think it's okay when applying not to put a graduate degree, because I think that's a big question to put in front of somebody who's 17 or 16 or 18.
And everybody knows that people change, right? So,
Yes. Yeah.
But Hillary, talk about how you at CC interpret answers to this question.
Yeah, we whip through this section a little bit like when we talked about the honors section,
Right.
how like you students probably spend a lot more time thinking about this than we do. So I will notice this section if a student clearly has a particular interest in an academic area, and then I happen to also see that they want to move forward with graduate studies in that area, then it totally makes sense to me and it sort of fills out the whole picture, right? And if there's nothing there and they say undecided, like that's not going to hurt the student at all. I know that somewhere between like 60 and 70% of our students end up going on to get a graduate degree at some point in their lives. So that's descriptive, not prescriptive, right? Like I'm not looking for students to go and get a graduate degree in order to like be admitted to CC. I will find their intellectual curiosity in other parts of the application. They don't have to prove it to me by saying that they want a graduate degree.
Susan, you've read in multiple different institutions, different types of institutions. You've been reading recently at 2 different institutions in the last 5 years. How has this been processed at the places you've been?
Well, questions like this generally don't have evaluative weight, meaning you don't score points by the right answer or lose points by the wrong answer. It's really what colleges are always looking for, and I think Hillary just said it well, is something that's additive, something that's going to add flavor or depth or interest to the student's presentation. The kids I work with, I really challenge to use this section to speak to the future, kind of the future you, the dream, the part of you that's a dreamer, and to kind of default to the doctor or lawyer. Maybe it's true, and if it's authentic and true, and it resonates with the rest of the application, why not? But it's like, don't be afraid to put something in there that you type in, because it's the kind of the magical combination of all the things you want to do, eventually. And it's going to bring you to life in that little part of your application with some potential. And, have a little fun with it. I mean, if in the back of your mind, you want to be a socially responsible entrepreneur, helping women grow, woven placemats, and I'm making this up as I'm going along because I think it's already been done. But, if you've got some dream of a way that you're going to use your education to impact the world, then share that idea. Now, would it be nice if there was tied to some other evidence elsewhere in the application? But, these kids have been on such a straight and narrow path for so long. No one's let them stray off into some wonderful exploration of something that is a little out there, because we're also concerned as parents and counselors of making our kids look right for colleges. And this is one chance where a kid can dream big. So I guess what I'm saying is it's not evaluative, but don't be afraid to be your future you in that question, and see what it looks like on paper.
I think that's so important. And I mean, I get it from a student's perspective, a parent's perspective. I want to get in. So I'm starting with the mindset of, is this going to help me get in or not get in? But there's a lot of components in the application that schools are just trying to get to know you more. I think of schools like Wake Forest, Elon, that have these little short quick take type things. And they'll say things like, they may say something like, what's your favorite restaurant in your hometown?
Right.
And people think like, when working with students, like, okay, what's the right answer? It goes back to what you said, Susan. There's not like the right answer, wrong answer. And okay, you got this, you said this, okay, you're scoring points. And I think it's really difficult for people to understand that, because so many times I'm saying to students, like, just be authentic and tell the truth. If you like this ice cream place and that's your favorite place, say that. This is just another way of a college getting to know you a little more. But there's a lot of overthinking.
Yeah.
And in general, I think even in people working sort of with independent educational counselors too, there's a lot of thinking of, if I get the right one, they'll sort of have the secret sauce and they'll help my kid get in XYZ school. Like, that's a very common mentality that people bring into the process. And I see them doing that with applications as well, even in things that are somewhat mundane, like, what's your favorite thing about your hometown? Or something, those little short questions that are just getting to know you. And people are like, okay, what am I supposed to say here?
Well, there are evaluative questions on the application, and then there are a lot of contextual. And it's really two paradigms that a kid has to carry in their mind at some point. But I find if you boil it down to, kind of the evaluative versus the contextual.
I like that. Yeah, good stuff. So bottom line is just be honest. Being honest is not going to hurt you.
Yeah, but
dream big.
I definitely those things, but I wouldn't go so far away. So if the whole application is engineering, and all of a sudden we see professional dancer, that would be,
It's a good point.
And then,
unless though, Vince, wouldn't there be a case for that? Maybe if you realize this was a student who'd been dancing competitively all of her life, and this is really the dream.
Yes, but then
she'll earn a living as an engineer, but she'll really be a ballroom dancer.
Yeah, I mean, you certainly could make a case if it's evident in the application, but I think sometimes I've seen faculty members, especially, who they see like one part of the application where it says, like, all of a sudden their dreams about being a doctor come to fruition. And when we were at Pomona, 50% of the people coming in wanted to study biology, wanted to be pre-med. So you should be consistent throughout your application. And if you don't want to say something, don't use that space to give it all away, is what I'm saying.
No, I think Vince is bringing out a really important point. So I'm recording this from San Diego, and I spent about 4.5 hours today at University of College at San Diego, UCSD. And 55 minutes of that was just a meeting I had with 3 admission officers after the tour. And one of the questions that I was getting into with them was, with UCSD, you have to state your first choice major, and then you have to, your second choice major, right? And so normally they'll evaluate you for your first choice major. And they even said, we say we don't admit by major, but we sort of kind of do, because first they look at you through that. And then if you're not competitive in that one, they'll look at your second one. And if you're not competitive there, they will normally go to undeclared. And if you're overall competitive, then you get in as an undeclared, and then you have to go through that process later on of, filling all the prerequisites and meeting the requirements for the program you're applying to. So I was asking them the question. I just thought about this when Vince was bringing this up. I said, well, what do you do with the student that says engineering first choice? You kind of can tell that's what they want to do. It's all over their application. And then they pick a second choice, and there's no evidence at all of anything in the application in this other major. And they admit it that there certainly are undersubscribed majors. I say, do you ding the kid, and say, there's no evidence in the file at all for this. I think they're just trying to backdoor their way in. Or do you say, you know what, how do I know, they kind of if they meet the requirements, they meet the requirements. And they said that can go either way, like that, and so So there's times when we will do that. And there's times when we'll say, you know what, this person's outstanding overall. And then there's other times maybe someone's borderline and there's no evidence at all of this other thing. So it speaks to Vince's point of, like, if there's nothing at all in the file about what you say, it sort of can raise questions. And I know we're stretching it a little bit, but I think it's an important point. Did that make sense? Or did that seem like apples and oranges?
No, it made sense to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
So hopefully this was helpful. Thank you. It was such a great question. Keep sending these questions in. All right, friends, if you're curious what we're going to be talking about next week in our roundtable discussion, we're talking about Glimpse video submissions. Glimpse video submissions and other video submissions. They're on the rise. We're going to be answering a bunch of questions that a listener sent in about submitting a video in your application. Hope you join us next week for that conversation.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Friends, we've reached the final part of what's a 2-hour interview with David Graves. The whole thing's up on our website. You listen to it in its entirety there. But in part 5, David talks about the ecology program and department at UGA is one of its outstanding programs. He talks about the landscape architecture program. He shares some things he really wants to see emphasized. I asked David to settle the age-old debate. Is UGA the first public charter school, or is that UNC Chapel Hill? Both of them claim it. Which one is correct? David shares what UGA needs to change to become an even better school. David shares when they do holistic review and when they do academic review. David talks about how they split up academic review and holistic review into different readers. And then David goes on the hot seat in the lightning round. Listen and enjoy. David, UGA is also known for its School of Education. What can you tell us about this department?
Lastly, I would say that the School of Education, it is one of the largest colleges of education within the Southeast, probably within the nation. And we're lucky that it just has such a broad range as far as things you can study and prepare to teach in the education field, both from kindergarten all the way up to high school work. You have such a broad stroke as far as the different languages we teach at UGA. If you're looking at teaching language or music, art therapy, I mean, you've got specializations throughout, also looking at special education or world language education, but also the strengths as far as just the very basic K through 12, math, English, science, social studies, etc. But it's just such a broad spectrum, and we've got a great connections with the different schools, both in the local area, but also throughout the state, that you, of course, will do your study, your student teaching. But again, you've just got some great facilities here, some great professors who are able to make those connections and help you to be successful on that next level.
And what other programs would you want to highlight, David? I know, like, you've got ecology, you've got ag, you're strong in a lot of ag science stuff, right? You've got international affairs. I mean, what other ones would you just want to highlight that might fly under the radar?
Wow, there's a lot. I think you mentioned ecology. It is, ecology, it's the Eugene Odom School of Ecology. He is the man as far as ecology. He wrote the textbook, and he was here. They have a real passion. It's a much smaller program. So one, you have those connections with the faculty a lot more closely, but it's one where they have a passion for working with those students and getting them. I always want to say getting them involved. I mean, it's a catchphrase. I mean, I don't want to always say that, but there's one where it's not always a field that is studied everywhere in a passion. It's sort of like sometimes a throw off. This is its own program that's tied into really getting students to understand ecology and getting them looking at master's programs, PhD. Another one would be landscape architecture. Again, it's a program where you don't see that very often. Yeah, you see architecture. Georgia Tech, great physical architecture program. But landscape architecture, we're one of the few in the country and one of the top ones in the country for students who are looking at saying, let's look at that living space. Let's look at communities, parks, all of that, and creating those. And you have to be aware as far as both the idea of physical space of building that space, but also looking at plants and plant biology and understanding what will grow well, what shapes well, what is the artistic style of a park and how to make it an inviting space. That's an amazing program. Again, just because it is one of the few in the country really that you see out there. So you don't get as many students, but you get the students who have that passion, and you're able to really get them in the understanding of here is a really strong faculty that has been in the world of landscape architecture. Usually these are people who come back because they have been in that field for a while. And really you get to learn and understand how to craft those spaces. And I think that's a growing area. I mean, again, it sounds silly, but as you are talking about, concrete and that challenge of that heat dome and all of that, you're suddenly saying, how do we green up spaces? That's where you go with that program. So there are a number of others.
No, I'm really glad you spent time on that because, a lot of times, especially we have a lot of college counselors that listen, and a lot of times, when you associate a school with being really strong in an area, the pistons go off in your brain when you meet someone that wants landscape architecture or wants ecology, and I mean, the business, even the journalism, I mean, those are, more common, but sometimes it's those real niche programs that people have that I think are great. So we're about to wind down our UGA section. No first time guest gets off without going on our hot seat, but is there anything about UGA you haven't shared that you want to share?
Oh man. We've covered so much. I think though that again, a big key is just the passion of the student body, that they enjoy being here. They love it. I mean, when we go to the game this weekend, it's going to be thousands of people barking and shouting and passionate about it, but it's also that community. And I try and get people to understand that, it's not just, oh, well, I study there and that's it. It is, similar in some ways to, certain high schools that are like, I am a community. I have that community there. You mentioned boarding schools. You have that feeling of, oh, I'm a Macaulay kid. And, that's going to live with you forever. It's the same way here. It's not just a place you're here for 4 years. It's a place that you're here 4 years and it gets in your blood forever. So
settle this debate. My UGA daughter she works at the Kingdom Flagler School now at UNC, and you go to UNC, they say, hey, we're the first public school ever. And you go to Georgia and you say, you're the first public school ever in the history of the country. So who's correct on this debate, UGA or UNC?
Well, of course I have to say UGA, but reality-wise, it's a tie. I mean, we're the first one to have, signed off on it. They're the first one with classes. It's nitpicky. I just say, give it a tie. We're all good.
There you go.
We're all friends here,
Love it.
I'm even wearing a shirt that's light blue, so not quite baby blue Carolina, but hey, I'm good with them. Tar Heels are good.
Good stuff. What is one thing you feel UGA can work on to be a better school?
I think that, and it's hard, as far as, because I'm looking at admissions from an admissions lens versus other things, but I think that admissions, it's always great to develop a little bit more as far as looking at the whole student. And I think we've talked about it, there's been a progression.
Sure.
And I think that even more so trying to progress that way, trying to make sure that we get away from just, hey, here's numbers, and get into those students. That's why our latest, release of data as far as saying, hey, here's a snapshot of what a admitted student looks like. We said, let's include how many students worked, how many students volunteered. And that's important to get out there and in a way that we can frame it to say, here's how many jobs that these students had, so that it captures more than just, oh, well, here's the SAT or an ACT. As far as a university, I think that we always want to develop a little bit more as far as a university, as far as saying, let's make sure, one, we are shifting to the students' needs within the scope that we can. Again, if more resources are needed for computer science, let's make sure that happens. But I think the biggest thing for us as far as an institution, but also as a state institution, because we're serving the state, is need-based aid. Need-based aid, we're one of the few states at all that don't have a strong need-based aid fund program. And it's because we have Hope and Zell, which covers a great deal, but there's a lot. When it started versus now, there is a gap, and that gap needs to be filled either by the student and the family or by the institution. We've raised a lot of money for need-based aid, but we still need more. We still need to raise more money, and the state needs to step in, what I would say, because we're not the only place. Georgia State, Georgia Southern, all the others, they're going to have gaps where those students that are on that Pell eligible and lower range, Pell eligible range, where they need assistance, even the middle range students, as far as middle income, they're going to need a gap where they're going to have a gap where they need help. And that can really be a strong focus over the next 5 years. I know Rick Clark has really pushed that over at Georgia Tech to say need-based aid, big key.
Yeah, and the state really needs to step its game up. I mean, I'm sorry, that's one of my soapboxes, hobby horses, whatever. Like we're one of 2 states not doing need-based aid, where the state's really contributing. So I appreciate you underscoring that. I realize you made me think of one thing I never asked you. So I like that you said you'd like to see increasingly more holistic review and looking at more factors, but you have been doing more holistic review in the early round than before. Is there any way an applicant knows that, or is it just you get to as many as you can? Like, when do you do holistic review in the early round versus when you don't? Is it a function of like running out of time and how many you can get in? Or I've never understood when you do it and when you don't.
So it's not a situation where it is time, but it's not a, hey, well, if we get you, we get you. If you don't, you don't. What we'll try and do is say, let's look at your academics first of all. And if you fall within a certain range on the lower end, sometimes we'll say academically, you're just not there. We could deny you.
Sure.
Because there's 45,000 applicants. And if you're in the bottom 10%, there's no way. 4 or 5,000, it's just not going to happen no matter what. So we can do that. We can also say for that, just above that, there's a certain range academically where we say, you know what, let's hold off on that review until maybe we'll defer that student early action so that we can have fall grades or anything new that they'll give us. Because right now, you're not bad, you're strong, but there's a lot more that are stronger, and we know we can't admit everybody. We've got to say, let's take a time to do it. Let's wait and do that holistic review till later. Or if we do a holistic review, we can say it just academically it wasn't strong. They weren't in the competitive range for that overall group. And maybe we'll do a second review later on when we've got fall grades. But we try and also split our reads into where we have one reader who will review the co-curricular, one reader who will review the academic afterwards. Like there's going to be academic review as far as grades, but then we split our holistic review into the compartmentalized of here's this person's going to look at activities, volunteer work, the writing, etc. Because we can do that right away. We've got that data in the application. Then the second part of the review is looking at how have you challenged yourself even more? Let's look at the grades and grade trends. Let's look at all of that. Plus, let's do a review of all the details that were done by that first read. We can stretch out our review process so we can go ahead and start in probably 2 weeks with doing that co-curricular review and then get to the other one later when my team is back, where we have part-time readers maybe doing that co-curricular review that work about 5 months out of the year, that are 20 hours a week. We have a lot of colleges will use part-time readers. We use them for that co-curricular review, and then our main staff that's full-time UGA admissions team, they'll both do the academic review and go over the co-curricular just to make sure everything is how we look at it. So we stretched out the review time. It used to be, we can only start reading when it's roughly October 15th, and we got a tight window. We've now stretched it out by splitting that, and we've split out, we say, you know what, let's split. We imitated Georgia Tech and said, hey, let's
Sure.
do in-state decisions for early action a little bit earlier than out-of-state so that we can stretch out our read season a little bit more. That's the tough part is early action. The window of time to review is so tight for a number of reasons. One,
Well, and I don't know, almost you're
yeah,
one of the very few people getting decisions out by November to people.
yeah,
In fact,
and
I
it's
don't even know
hard.
if there's anybody else getting 25,000 plus apps getting
Yeah,
decisions out like before even early decisions come out from school. So it's appreciated by people. I tell you what, they like that early read.
yeah, and a part of it is that at least for the in-state, the goal of the administration and us is, hey, let's hope to have it out by just before Thanksgiving. So holiday gatherings, all that, there are some students who are going to say, yeah, I'm going to Georgia. And that's at least that positive. We know it should be right around there. Again, we delay the out of state a little bit, and that gives us a little bit more wiggle room to be able to review files. But we've tried to be able to say, how can we split up the review in such a way to give us a larger window of time? And again, if you're able to say, these students are strong, but they're just not at the highest level where we know we'd admit them, we can defer that decision. They're still competitive. We just have a much longer window of time from, December through generally end of February to be able to really dig in more, and we can get those fall grades in.
So, David, it's time for the hot seat. So, Dave, you're driving in the car. We all have pet peeves with driving. What's the thing that grinds your gears that a driver does that just irks you?
Oh, man. Two kids, they always wanted mom to drive, not me to drive, because she drives faster, she gets there quicker. I am the safe driver. And so anytime I see people who, if there's a lane that's about to close, and people zoom ahead, that just that bugs the fool out of me. It's like, hey, everybody's in this line. Stay in the line. Don't make people mad. Come on.
There you go. What would you do if you couldn't do anything in not just admissions, but education?
I've found that I have maybe I feel that I've got the knack and nobody else thinks I do, but I love data. I love data and analysis of that data. And I think that if I had to, I'd say, hey, let me go in that field to study analytics and understand what the numbers actually tell you versus what you think it is. I love Moneyball, both as a book and as a movie, but I loved it because that was my passion, was saying, what is this data telling us? And what is the reality of the data versus what we think is really happening? So I would go into that field.
What's on your bucket list? What's a place you haven't visited, but you got to get to it while you're on this earth?
Well, one, I'll say that Spain, because I'm going there in December. We're gonna release.
What's the occasion?
Just three couples, two great friends as far as that.
Oh, nice.
From college, and we said, yeah, let's go to Spain for 9 days. And so we're heading out. We're gonna release the out of state decisions hopefully in early December. Then I'm jumping on a plane right away. But also, my son, when he was in college, he was able to go to Australia for a couple of weeks, and he was just amazed by it. And I think that Australia would be one where I'm going to be going someday. Andy has told me, my boss Andy, you talked about, he said,
yeah,
Dave, I hope you're here for as long as you want to be, and hopefully I'm here for as long as I want to be. But, at some point I'm going to say, you know what, I'm exhausted. Admissions is an exhausting time sometimes, and I'm ready to hit the travel circuit as far as vacations. And so Australia will probably be the first one on the list.
Speaking of diversions from admissions, how do you relax? How do you unwind? Any hobbies besides going to UGA football games?
I read a lot. That's the first thing. I read a ton of stuff. My family does a lot of games together, as far as both when we're together games, but also, just the weekly, the daily Wordle, Myrtle, things like that, as far as we share it and we give each other grief. Occasionally I play golf. My son is pushing me, so we've done a couple of weekends where we've done disc golf. We've occasionally skied, although I'm getting a little old for that, and tennis and pickleball. So I like to get out.
Nice.
I like to get outdoors. Again, talked about Athens. We are right near, within an hour and a half distance of so many amazing natural wonders. Whether it is, just the state parks, going up and whitewater rafting. We've been able to take advantage of that a lot. And so there's some amazing hikes, amazing views, amazing trips that we've made just within about a 2-hour drive that we really enjoy.
Give us a book. You're a reader. Give us a book. Our audience
man.
is mostly parents. Give us a book that you think parents would benefit from reading. It doesn't have to be related to admissions at all. It doesn't even have to be nonfiction. But what's a book that you think would be a good one to recommend?
The one that I love is Freakonomics. Both I love the podcast, and they've developed it out. Again, getting past, I think it's probably because I've written a blog for, 13 years, maybe 14. And I get the question all the time as far as, well, is this really true? Well, is this really? I hear you say it, but. And I'm like, I can prove to you why it is. And just the idea of being able to say, here's actual data that says what you're thinking isn't really right, or what you're thinking is right, and here's why. Again, going back to the major thing, I always say, no, we don't admit by major, because why would I be stupid enough to say, well, let's admit by major and then let them change their major before they even get on campus? Either I'm an idiot, or we just believe me. So, things like that. I think that's a good one. I'm also reading Jeff Salingo's book of Who Gets In and Why right now.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Delved
We've had
into
him
it
on our podcast.
I think that,
he's got another book coming out that I'm looking forward to. He's working on it right now.
Okay, I didn't know. What is it?
It should be. Yeah, it's kind of like, it's challenging the concept of rankings, and he's not doing a college that changed lives thing, but he is going to he said he's going to name some names on some hidden value schools that fly under the radar a little bit. But I think he's challenging people to think about college not through the prism of rankings.
And I think that probably for parents, Malcolm Gladwell did a 2-part series on college rankings and also on the LSAT.
That was good.
That were great as far as just go, listen, know that, he has his own viewpoint, but it's good to understand what the reality is as far as what makes up a good school. Is not a ranking. It's not you were 71st versus 72nd. No, it's what fits best and what provides a great education. But the LSAT one was great as far as law school exams. And is it really is an LSAT score really the indicator you want for a great lawyer? Probably not. But those are just another couple of good things to read or listen to. Yeah.
Well, our listeners are sponges, so thank you for that. Dave, you've been so super generous with your time. You've given me 2 hours, given our listeners 2 hours. I just want to thank you so much. And if you could close by telling people about your blog, and you're active on Twitter. I know I've interacted with you a lot. I remember writing you and Rick and saying, hey, can you guys get the same dates together for decisions? And I was very happy to see you did that. But let people know how they can access your blog and your handle on Twitter.
Sure, no problem. Actually, I'd probably look it up a little bit as far as my handle on Twitter. But the blog, you just go to the UGA admissions website, which is admissions.uga.edu. And then one of the options at the top, across the top, is the admissions blog. I've been writing it for, again, 13, 14 years probably. Some of it's broad spectrum sort of idea of, hey, let's look at college as a whole and what they look at. And some of it's very narrowed of, all right, we're about to release Georgia early action decisions. Here's what you should expect, and here's that. I released one a couple of weeks ago that really went over what goes into a review and breaking it down into the areas. I make sure that I can both take questions and answer them quickly. So if a parent or a student has questions, just write down the blog, and I'm happy to answer them. You can be anonymous. It's not a problem. It's not going to be, here's, John Q. Smith or whatever, and I'm not going to know who it is unless they tell me, of course. But it's one where I want to give feedback. And a part of it is to be informational. A part of it is also because, like any other admissions office, we answer a lot of questions. And sometimes it's easy for my staff just to say, hey, go right here. It explains it all. And it's a history of things, of just being able to say, here is what we do. Here's why we do it. Here's our timelines. Here's what's important in our review, and giving them an understanding of that so that it's out there in the world. As far as Twitter or X, as far as that, my handle is Dr. Graves. Again, not Dr. Graves really, but Dr. Graves UGA admin, or at Dr. Graves UGA. How about if we do that? At Dr. Graves UGA. And you'll be able to find me. And if you just search for UGA admissions, you'll find me as far as some of my tweets as well. And again, I just try and give some updates on what's going on at UGA, the admissions process, sometimes breaking myths, sometimes sharing information.
Thank you so much for everything. And thanks for admitting my daughter.
No problem.
Thank you for that, too.
I'm glad it all worked out.
Seeing you.
All right. Take care.
Yeah,
Bye.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Go Dogs.
Friends, on Monday's episode, we got a couple things going on. If you look back to episode 466, in that episode, we talked about a creative idea to help you build a customized way of evaluating colleges. And I mentioned 26 or 7 factors there to rank and go through an exercise. Well, I made a couple tweaks to that, partly by me doing a reflection and partly because a listener sent in a suggestion. And I thought about it for about a week or two, and I said, that's really good. So I'm going to share that with you. And then, I've been struggling with how to communicate all of this stuff from this NACAC conference. And not only the NACAC conference, it's the 20 college visits that I did in the 26 days I was in Cali. And that saying, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? I kind of realized I was kind of overwhelmed by just the magnitude of all the information that I want to share. So instead of parceling it all out and let me do a deep dive on the NACAC conference or even on my trips, what I want to do is just distill just a dose here, a dose there. I don't know. I'm not going to say how many weeks it's going to be because it depends when I feel like I have content that's worthy of your time. But it may be a dozen weeks that I just share some nuggets from the conference or the trip. And so I'll be sharing some of them starting on Monday, but you can expect that to go definitely through, October and November and probably through December as well. And then we'll have the final part of my interview with Aaron Wolf. We're going through 18 ways, not 17 because I can't count, 18 ways in which 8 offers are all over the place. And even if this is part 4 of 5, we actually complete all the reasons. I believe it's reasons 13 through 18. And you're like, well, Stuck, what's part 5? Part 5, we just cover a wide range of other financial topics in part 5. So in part 4, we'll finish the whole 18 reasons. So we hope you'll join us for that conversation. And friends, this is decision-making time. Just in the last 3 days, I've had 3 students that I've met with, and another one was just communicating with me by text back and forth. And they're having cold feet right now on their early decision, which is usually an indication that you really don't need to apply early decision. One is thought they were going to ED to BU and then visited some schools in Washington, D.C., and they liked them a lot. They liked Georgetown. They liked American. So now they're not sure about whether to ED to BU. So I walk them through that whole process. And normally, if you're not sure, I usually indicate that it's an indication that you shouldn't do it. Another student was all prepared to ED to Vanderbilt, and now they're getting cold feet on that. Another one changed their mind on Claremont McKenna, and another one is actually on the fence about Claremont McKenna, and they both look solid. So why am I saying all this? The students feel this sense of pressure in talking to them, like, oh my goodness, I feel so much pressure. I feel so much stress. I got to get it right. And I think it's because there's too much of an emphasis on, if I don't get this decision right, then either I'm not going to have a happy or positive college experience, or somehow my career goes on a different trajectory. Maybe it's a shoot to the moon trajectory versus just flying a little above sea level or somewhere in between. That's the perception. And I'm always going to push back on that because I really do believe no matter where you go, You can make it work for you by picking the right teachers and the right roommate and the right dorm and the right club and the right internships. It's like navigating your way through the college process. And I think sometimes there's a mindset that if I don't get it right, my life changes in significant, life-altering ways. And I'm here to tell you that it's not where you go. It's not where you go, but it's what you do when you get there. And it's what you do when you get out of there. See you on Monday, friends. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us and you'll get every single episode as soon as it is released. If you're interested, there are a few ways you can really support our podcast. You can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can help us pay our staff and our expenses by donating on our website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. I'm the producer of the podcast, but we have a fantastic team of 15. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. Lisa Ruff, Dr. David Williams, Linda Depker, Susan Tree, Vince Garcia, and Julia Esquivel. And to our substitute co-host, Sylvia Borgo. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs are from Kimberly Blass. Lily Parikh manages our Instagram. Our image editor is Talha Khan. Joyce Ducker does our website episode updates. And our webmaster is Stylianos Dimitriou. And if you want to have a coaching session with Lisa, Linda, or me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you have a question you want us to answer, or if you have a recommended resource or article you think we should discuss, just send it to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Our favorite method is for you to record your own voice at speakpipe.com/YCBK. By the way, check out our website, where you'll find lots of content that is not on any podcast app. Our website is yourcollegeboundkid.com. If you want to learn about other hot admissions topics, follow us on Twitter at YCBK Podcasts. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting again with you every single Monday and Thursday.